Hi everybody, I had put out this video. Let me start with saying I had put out this video out a couple of days ago, and I actually believe that I interjected too much of my biased opinion on the rapture. And so I just want to present the information straight as I have discovered it, just how the Great Pyramid of Giza pertains to Daniel's 70th week, the 7 year timeline that is, and show you the timeline itself and how it relates to Solomon's temple and also to Moses' tabernacle in the wilderness. It's kind of difficult not to interject your own views, but so I want to try and keep it as best as possible free of my personal views on the rapture in the timeline, and just present this for those who want to see when, according to this Giza timeline, when the seals and trumpets as well as the wrath will occur at the end of the 7 year timeline, the 2,520 days of Daniel's 70th week. So those of you who are returning, I've shortened the video, but it is mostly a repeat of the information I presented a couple of days ago. But I will try and keep it as bias free as possible. We all have our own personal views as to when the rapture occurs during the tribulation, and I will try and keep that out of this and just simply present Daniel's 70th week and the Giza timeline. So why do I think the Great Pyramid of Giza is the altar to the Lord? Well, in Isaiah 19, verses 19 through 20, it says, "In that day there will be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar to the Lord at its border." And Giza literally means border. "And it will be for a sign and for a witness to the Lord of hosts in the land of Egypt." So the fact that there is this structure that is at the border at Giza, which is the oracle in stone, it is a sign, and it does in fact give you all the information for Daniel's 70th week. And I believe it is a witness to the Lord in the land of Egypt. So that is my opinion, that it is 100% the altar to the Lord, or the temple of the Lord in the Giza pyramid structure itself. Anyways, I'm going to go a little bit more into its structure. Is actually set up to be identical to that of the tabernacle, Moses' tabernacle in the wilderness, and Solomon's temple, and I'll show you the comparisons right here. So here's a cutaway or inside view of Moses' tabernacle in the wilderness. You have the Levitical priest line from the tribe of Levi. They were the only ones that were permitted to enter the tabernacle or the sanctuary. Here you have, there's two veils. This first veil they go through, and that leads you to this first inner part, which is the holy place. So when you hear Christ say, or in the book of Daniel, when you see him standing in the holy place, that's what they're talking about. And the holy place contains the showbread table, the altar of incense, and the menorah with 7 candles representing the 7 lampstands, or the 7 churches. And then the only once a year the Levitical priests were allowed to enter this back portion, which is the Holy of Holies. They had to go through the second veil or curtain, but they called it veils, to enter the Holy of Holies, and that was on the Day of Atonement. And the only item that's in the Holy of Holies is the Ark of the Covenant, which has the lid on top, which is called the mercy seat, which is guarded by the 2 cherubim. And the mercy seat, as you know, is our Lord Jesus Christ. So there's a view of Moses' tabernacle, and here's a cutaway view or a side view of Solomon's temple, where you have the porch, which is the entry before you go into the inner middle holy place, and then the very back, which is the Holy of Holies. But here, instead of using veils, they have a veil here that leads into a Holy of Holies, the curtain. But the front one was actually a framed door. So the Levitical priests would enter the front framed door, and that would take you into the Holy of Holies. You see, it's pretty small here, but it's the altar of incense. There's the menorah here, and the showbread table should be in there as well. You enter the veil and you go into the Holy of Holies, and it had the two cherubim that were overlooking the Ark of the Covenant. And the two pillars here were Jachin and Boaz that were on the porch that led into the frame door leading into the holy place. So here's what I feel is the best representative view of what Solomon's temple looked like. I believe the entry was this stepped, almost pyramid-like structure with the two columns of Jachin and Boaz, the frame doors in here. You would go into the holy place, and then the very back part was the Holy of Holies. This whole thing was walled in, and that was the inner court, and there was the outer court as well. And looking at the front view with the two columns of Jachin and Boaz, there's the frame door. Blowing it up and looking at an exploded view of it, the frame door had this stepped frame door, and you entered into that to go into the holy place. So it had this stepped feature to it, both outside and inside. And that's exactly what you see when you enter the grand gallery, which leads up to this small opening, which is the first veil to go into the area of the holy place in the Great Pyramid. You have to go to almost the internal portion of the Great Pyramid, and you get to the grand gallery, which in fact does have that same stepped feature that you see as the frame door of Solomon's temple. And here is a biblical artifact of the doorway of Solomon's temple that led into the temple. Here's the angled view, and here's a front-on view of it. And it had this step door feature for Solomon's temple, or they call it multi-framed. And looking at the grand gallery again, you can definitely see the one-to-one connection between that of the Great Pyramid and that as a biblical artifact of the doorway of Solomon's temple. And finally, within the antechamber, or the holy place, which would be in the Giza pyramid timeline, this is the granite leaf, which is broken in two unintentionally and is wedged back into place. This would represent the second trumpet and the third trumpet when they drop. And on the front side of this granite leaf is this seal that protrudes, a boss that protrudes, and in the secular community they call it a seal. And interestingly, it has the resemblance of a double rainbow. So I believe that this seal is the covenant of God that he had with Noah. And again, this represents the timeline in which the 144,000 will be sealed. And then after that will be the first trumpet, which will be this boss that's raised up. Front surface will be the seal of the 144,000. And then the second trumpet when this lower slab drops, and then the third trumpet when this upper slab drops. But I won't go beyond that talking about it here. So again, I believe that Solomon's temple especially, this is what the Great Pyramid of Giza is modeled exactly after, or they actually came later and modeled it after the altar of the Lord in Giza, which is the Great Pyramid. So let me show you the cutaway view now of the Great Pyramid of Giza. So here's an architectural drawing because they can't get a side shot of it. So this passage, this ramp here is the end of the Grand Gallery, and you actually have to go up this 3-foot step. It's called the Great Step. And then you're on this small plateau before you go through this low passage. And then there's an internal portion that's the antechamber, which would be representative of the holy place. You go through a second low passage or a second veil, and that would lead you into the king's chamber or the inner sanctuary, which is the Holy of Holies. And at the end of this porch section, before you go through this first veil, it represents the door or the first veil that you have to go through. And of course, Christ is the door. And And then there's a hidden step right before that part of going through the door. So you can get information about this structure basically in Exodus 26 verses 31 to 37, and also in Exodus 31 to 10 to get more information on the construction of the temple. So the inside dimensions of the Great Pyramid of Giza have been measured at length by various people, but the last time that was permitted, it was Dr. Adam Rutherford. He was the last one, but before there was David Davidson permitted to measure all of the lengths in the gallery. But so I have that information, and so here's the ramp of the Grand Gallery, but from the base of the Great Step right here to this plateau, I won't go into all the dimensions, but I will show you. It's like 35.763 inches, almost 3 feet that you have to go up to get to this plateau. This first part, I had erroneously, it's 61.6 inches, but it's actually 62 inches, and that relates to 62 weeks, which is in Daniel's prophecy. The first low section is 52 inches. Then there's the last part of the limestone that goes into the antechamber, which is 13 inches. And then this is the width of the granite leaf, and so on and so forth. And then the length, the last part, is the length of this last second low section, which is the second veil, which is 101.146 inches. So why am I saying all that? Well, each one of these are the different seals and trumpets, and this overall length of just this plateau portion adds up to 2,300 days plus 20 days. So there's 20 days of wrath, and the 2,300 is how long it takes that it says in Daniel to cleanse the sanctuary. Well, anyway, so if you go into all of these, this gives you the exact timeline of Daniel's 70th week. But you see that this timeline is only 331 inches essentially, and each inch equals a day. And so it's way too short to be Daniel's 70th week, which is 2,520 days. But you see this issue is solved by multiplying each of the measurements by 7. And so why would I do that? It's because the time of Jacob's trouble is sevenfold. So here, like the 35.763 inches, multiply that by 7, it's basically 250 days. This first portion before the hidden step is 42 inches, so that's 239 days. This one is roughly 20 something inches. I don't remember all of them, but it's 141 days. This 52.029 under the first low section ends up being 364 days, so on and so forth till you get to the very end. And just the plateau portion, not including the great step, just the plateau portion ends up being 2,320 days, which is the 2,300 days spoken of, I believe, in Daniel 8 to cleanse this sanctuary. Yeah, Daniel 8:14. Plus there ends up being 20 days of wrath on the end. And likewise with the great step and stuff, once you subtract the time from the fourth and fifth trumpets, which the times are shortened, you end up with the 2,520 days, which makes up Daniel's 70th week. So here's another view of that same timeline with the 250 days, the 239 days, and the 141, which equals 62 weeks, which is 434 days, 364 days, so on and so forth. Well, if you sign it, this ends up being the first seal, which is 250 days long. And I'll show you how I got the start date of July 27th, 2018, which was that total lunar eclipse over Israel and the Middle East last summer. Then for the second seal, it's 293 days. The third seal is 141 days, which is the secret hidden step, which is the Black Horseman. The fourth seal, which is the pale horseman, is 364 days. Then you enter into the holy place, which is the antechamber. Once you pass this lower first passage or veil. And the fifth seal is 91 days. The sixth and seventh seals are 40 days. And then the seventh is 10 days. This granite leaf with the boss seal on it are the first, second, and third trumpets. The split will be the second and third trumpet. That boss seal on front was the first trumpet. And then you go into these four, I forget the name of it, but these are the fourth, fifth, and sixth trumpet. And then you enter the second low passage, which goes into the King's Chamber or the Holy of Holies. The second low passage is actually the seventh trumpet, which is 708 days long. And at the very end of it, I didn't show that here, the very tail end, 20 days out of the 708 days is God's wrath. And then this is limestone here, so that's tribulation. And then once you hit the harder rock, which is granite, red granite, that's when you enter the great tribulation at that dividing line between the limestone floor and the granite floor. And so when you add it all up, starting from the base of the great step, the 250 all the way to the 708, you have, here's the summation or adding up everything right here, and you end up with 2,570 days, which is 50 days over Daniel's 70th week. But this is before the shortening, of which the fourth trumpet, a third of the day and night are smitten, and the fifth trumpet was only 5 months long, as you read in the book of Revelation. That'll shorten the time 50 days. It'll be 20 for the fourth trumpet and another 30 for the fifth trumpet. That leads you down, that subtracts 50 days, going back to 2,520 days of Daniel's 70th week. But another point of interest, I'll go back. I know I'm showing multiple different views of it, but those are the only drawings that exist. But the first low passage was 52 inches long, being the first veil, and the second low passage was 101 inches long, being the second veil. But you see that these add up, the 52 plus 101 add up to 153 days, which is the same thing as the 153 fish that was in John 21:21, which I believe will be the last trump. And it's split into two, but it equals 153. So notice that it's torn in two, and so the two veils are rent into two pieces from top to bottom. So from Matthew 27:51, it says, "Then behold, the veil of the temple, which this is in Giza, was torn in two from top to bottom. Thus we have direct access to our Heavenly Father with the crucifixion of Christ and the veil being torn in two." So when did Daniel's 70 week begin? So we're already in the tribulation, and it started July 27, 2018, with the longest total lunar eclipse over Israel and the Middle East being 103 inches long. So the calculated start date ends up being exactly that same date. And knowing this start date of July 27, 2018, the very base, here's the ramp of the Grand Gallery, the base of the Great Step, you can now calculate, knowing the lengths of each of the events. For the first seal, for example, 250 days, and the second seal, 293 days. So the start of the first seal was on July 27, 2018. 250 days later will be the start of the second seal. 293 days after that will be the start of the third seal. 141 days later will be the start of the fourth seal, and so on and so forth till you come to the very end. You subtract back off the 20 days of wrath, and that's where the end of Daniel's 70th week will be. And finally, so here are the dates listed here for both the seals and the trumpets. Notice that the seventh trumpet ends on June 21st, 2023, which is summer, and when Christ said he returns, that summer is nigh at the last trump. And then after all their wrath occurs, it's actually a very long seventh trumpet, 708 days long, but the very final end of the full 2,520 days is May 28th, 2025. I'll leave these dates up for you to read for yourself. I won't list them, but this is the information based on the measurements that were obtained for the Giza pyramid. They might be off a day or two up or down, just simply based on measurement error by those who measured the pyramid. And I used the measurements based on Dr. Adam Rutherford that he did in, I believe, 1968, which was the last time that it was permitted to measure the pyramids. Well, anyways, in this part one, I wanted to show how similar or nearly identical the Giza pyramid from the Great Step, which is the porch, to the King's Chamber, going through the antechamber in the middle, which is the holy place. Solomon's temple is very similar to the Giza pyramid, and I think it is providing Daniel's 70th week timeline. So I wanted to give you an introduction to why I believe the Great Pyramid of Giza is in fact the temple of the Lord in the middle of Egypt and the altar to the Lord. So provide that background information, as well as kind of lengthy on the timeline for Daniel's 70th week. But in the next part, there are lines on both the east wall and the west wall of the holy place, or the antechamber in the Giza pyramid, and they pertain specifically to the stuff or the events that will happen to both the United States and Israel. So please come back and watch that. I hope to have that out in the next couple of days as well. So in part two, I hope to get to the west and east walls, which are within the antechamber, or what would be the holy place according to Solomon's temple. I'll give you a little quick tidbit. You see that they're different. So the west wall, these vertical lines indicate dates that will occur to the United States, while the vertical lines on the east wall pertain to dates that will occur to Israel. So I hope you come back for part two and possibly part three. I have a pretty lengthy presentation, but I didn't present it all here. And this time I kept out my own basic views on when the rapture is. I'm just presenting the timeline, which is shown within the Giza pyramid structure itself, specifically the passageway that leads to the King's Chamber, which would be the Holy of Holies. Anyways, I hope you guys have a blessed week. I hope to get out part two soon, maybe not within the next few days, but hopefully within the next couple of weeks. And I will talk to you soon. Take care.